The atmosphere in the first-class cabin of Korean Air Flight KE-018 was less about luxury and more about suspended isolation. It was a space designed to mimic silence, where the soft whisper of the Rolls-Royce engines became the heartbeat of 30,000 feet. Kwon Ji-Hoon, CEO of K-Corp, Korea's undisputed leader in smart technology and entertainment, was the physical embodiment of this quiet, high-altitude tension. Dressed in perfectly tailored charcoal wool, the kind of suit that looked both impossibly expensive and utterly unremarkable, he sat by the window, a man carved from polished granite. At 32, his success was staggering, but it had come at the cost of every genuine, unguarded moment. His life was a performance of responsibility, governed by market trends and familial expectations. He had taken this particular flight from New York to Seoul to escape a hostile acquisition attempt, hoping that 12 hours in the sky would yield the strategy he couldn't formulate on the ground. Ji-Hoon hadn't slept in over 48 hours. He tried to focus on the holographic projection of a financial model dancing above his tray table, but the numbers swam. He leaned his head against the cool leather of the headrest, closing his eyes for what he intended to be 2 minutes of meditation, a technique his personal coach swore by. In the aisle seat beside him sat Amara, or Mara Johnson. At 24, she was vibrant, ambitious, and utterly exhausted. Mara was flying to Seoul to begin a year-long cultural exchange program at Yonsei University, majoring in East Asian studies with a minor in architecture. She had scraped together savings, worked 3 jobs, and navigated a mountain of scholarship applications to afford this moment. And thanks to a last-minute miles upgrade from a kindly ticket agent, this seat. She had been too excited and too anxious to sleep before the flight. Now, hours into the journey, her body rebelled. She had managed a quick dinner, a terrible attempt at reading a dense academic paper, and then the deep, inescapable pull of exhaustion claimed her. She shifted, turning her body slightly towards the window, seeking comfort. Ji-Hoon felt the first soft, unexpected weight a little after the cabin lights dimmed for the long night crossing over the Pacific. It wasn't a bump or a lean. It was a gentle, settling pressure, something like a large, warm pillow being placed against his shoulder. A mass of soft, fragrant curls, the scent of coconut and something sharp and citrusy, spilled over the fine wool of his jacket. A small, rhythmic breath, the kind that only comes from deep, uncomplicated sleep, feathered against his collarbone. Kwon Ji-Hoon, the man who dictated the futures of thousands and whose schedule was planned down to the second by 4 executive assistants, froze. His first instinctual reaction was annoyance. Who? This was first class, a sanctuary of personal space. His hand automatically twitched, ready to push the intruder away. But the movement stopped, suspended in the cool, circulating air. He opened his eyes slowly, looking down. The woman beside him was utterly lost in sleep, her long, dark eyelashes resting like delicate fans against her cheek. She was beautiful, her skin a rich, smooth mahogany that seemed to absorb and soften the cabin's blue ambient light. The relaxed curve of her neck, the utterly vulnerable way her hand rested loosely on her lap, spoke of a deep, trusting release. She looked entirely unburdened. Ji-Hoon had not been truly unburdened since he was 10 years old, before his father began preparing him for K-Corp. He was suddenly captivated by the sheer, reckless abandon of her sleep. He realized with a startling clarity that cut through his exhaustion that this was the closest he had been to another human being outside of a rigidly professional context in years. It was intimacy without expectation, accidental and pure. He checked his wrist. 4 hours left in the flight. He took a deep, silent breath and carefully shifted his posture, adjusting the angle of his neck so as not to disturb her. His shoulder, usually taut with the stress of executive decisions, softened ever so slightly to accommodate the weight of her head. He let the financial model on his table dissolve. He didn't want to think about quarterly reports or his upcoming meeting with the Minister of Culture or the relentless, echoing silence of his own apartment back in Seoul. For the next 4 hours, Kwon Ji-Hoon simply sat, motionless, a human pillow. He watched the subtle rise and fall of her chest, the slow, peaceful movements of her dreams. He felt an unsettling, entirely new sensation, guardianship. He was guarding her sleep, protecting this small, accidental pocket of peace in the sterile chaos of the world. When the cabin lights began to brighten for the pre-landing service, Mara stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, blinking against the sudden increase in light. She stretched luxuriously, a soft, sleepy sound escaping her lips. Then she felt the strange, solid warmth beneath her cheek. She shot upright as struck by lightning, her heart leaping into her throat. "Oh my God, I am so sorry," she whispered fiercely, eyes wide in horror as she looked at the impeccably dressed, handsome stranger whose shoulders she had just thoroughly seized. Ji-Hoon, his arms slightly numb, offered a slight, almost imperceptible smile. It was a smile his board members had never seen, relaxed at the corners, touched by genuine amusement. "It was quite all right," he replied, his voice a low, smooth baritone. He shifted his shoulder, feeling the blood rush back. "You must have been very tired." "Tired is an understatement," Mara groaned, clutching her forehead. "I'm Amara Johnson, but everyone calls me Mara. I don't know what came over me. You should have pushed me off. Seriously, my manners are usually better than human furniture." Ji-Hoon chuckled softly, a rare, warm sound. "Kwon Ji-Hoon, and I assure you, Miss Johnson, for a few hours you were the most interesting piece of human furniture I have encountered in a very long time." He reached a hand to touch the spot where her head had rested. The fabric was slightly crumpled, and he realized he liked the disarray. "Kwon Ji-Hoon," Mara repeated, taking in his sharp, intelligent eyes and the air of contained power that now seemed less threatening and more intriguing. "It's a pleasure, though perhaps not the most dignified of introductions." "It was certainly memorable," he agreed. As the flight attendants began serving breakfast, Mara found herself chatting easily with the silent CEO. She learned he was returning from business in the States. He learned she was an eager student, a first-time visitor to Korea, fueled by curiosity and strong coffee. "So, what does K-Corp do?" Mara asked innocently, stirring her coffee. She'd recognized the K, but hadn't put two and two together. Ji-Hoon paused, an expression of faint surprise crossing his face. No one ever asked him what his company did. They asked how much it was worth. We make things," he said simply. "Smart devices, entertainment. We are trying to shape the future, Mara." "I hope you're making beautiful things then. The world has enough ugly technology. Architecture taught me that utility without beauty is just clutter." Her perspective caught him off guard. Ji-Hoon was used to being flattered or feared, not philosophically challenged by a sleepy, articulate stranger. "I will keep that in mind," he said, and this time the smile was genuine. "Beautiful things." When the plane landed at Incheon, the energy in the cabin shifted back to business. Ji-Hoon's personal security detail, two impeccably dressed men, moved discreetly towards their seats. The bubble of anonymity was about to burst. "Well," Mara said, gathering her modest carry-on bag, "thank you for the unsolicited nap space, Mr. Kwon. I owe you a shoulder replacement." "I shall accept a rain check on that," he said, standing tall. He pulled a crisp, elegant business card from an inner pocket. "My personal contact. Should you find yourself needing guidance, or perhaps a better understanding of Korean clutter in Seoul, please call me." Mara took the card. It was thick, slightly textured, and carried only the K-Corp logo and the name Kwon Ji-Hoon with a private mobile number. No title. She slipped it into her passport wallet. "I appreciate that, Ji-Hoon. Safe travels." He watched her disappear down the jetway, her confident stride carrying her toward the immigration hall. Then, the granite mask of the CEO settled back over his features, and he was once again Kwon Ji-Hoon, the powerhouse. But his shoulder felt strangely empty, and the silence in the car waiting on the tarmac felt louder than usual. Mara's first few weeks in Seoul were a whirlwind of cultural immersion, jet lag, and the humbling realization of her own outsider status. She loved the chaos of the markets, the serene beauty of the traditional Hanok villages, and the efficiency of the subway. But she was struggling. The language barrier was immense, and despite the warmth of many students, there was an underlying, subtle distance. Her focus on Korean political history and urban planning, while fascinating, felt isolating. The K-Corp card remained tucked safely in her wallet, a strange, forgotten artifact from a sleepless night. She hadn't seriously considered using it. What would she say? "Hi, Billionaire CEO whose shoulder I drooled on, I need help finding the nearest bookstore that sells English books on Joseon Dynasty architecture." Meanwhile, Kwon Ji-Hoon's life had returned to its punishing high-stakes pace. He successfully thwarted the acquisition, launched a new line of smart wearables, and negotiated a lucrative streaming deal for his entertainment division. He was operating at peak performance, yet he felt a nagging sense of distraction. He kept recalling the feeling of warm, heavy curls on his shoulder, the citrus scent, the simple innocence of Mara's questions. One Saturday afternoon, while researching a paper on the revitalization of Seoul's public spaces, Mara visited the Dongdaemun Design Plaza, DDP. She was sketching a structural detail when she heard her name. "Mara? Amara Johnson?" She looked up, instantly recognizing the sharp lines and composed elegance of the man standing over her. Ji-Hoon, dressed this time in casual but perfectly fitted dark jeans and a cashmere sweater, looked less like a CEO and more like a high-fashion model, but the intensity in his eyes was the same. "Ji-Hoon, Mr. Kwon, what in the world?" He cut her off with a smooth, almost conspiratorial smile. "I prefer Ji-Hoon, especially when we are surrounded by Zaha Hadid's curves, and I assure you this is no coincidence. I've been following the university exchange social schedules. It was not easy to determine your usual weekend haunts, but the DDP seemed a safe bet for an architecture enthusiast." Mara was momentarily speechless. You stalked my university calendar? Let's call it highly targeted information retrieval, he corrected smoothly. "It is what I do best. I found myself thinking about our conversation. Utility versus beauty. I needed an unbiased perspective on our new corporate headquarters design concept." Mara laughed, a genuine, joyful sound that echoed pleasantly in the high-ceilinged space. "A billion-dollar company needs a student's opinion? I'm flattered." "A student with an untainted perspective," he corrected, his voice serious, "and one who has seen my most vulnerable side, my sleep-deprived state. That level of trust is priceless." He offered her his arm. "I was just about to find a very good place for Korean traditional tea. Would you be willing to offer me an hour of your time, Mara?" That hour stretched into 5. They found a quiet, traditional tea house in Insadong, tucked away from the tourist throngs. Ji-Hoon didn't talk about quarterly reports or market shares. Instead, he asked about her life in New York, her dreams for her career, and the political philosophies she found intriguing. He listened with an intensity that made her feel like the most important person in the world. Mara, in turn, learned about the crushing loneliness of his life. He spoke of his childhood, raised by strict, demanding parents who saw him only as the heir, the vessel for the family legacy. He confessed that for all his power, his world was built on brittle glass, constantly watched and judged. "I have 5,000 acquaintances, Mara, and perhaps 2 people I could call a friend. One of them is my security head and the other is my driver. And now a girl who used your shoulder as a pillow?" Mara quipped gently, her eyes softening. "And now you," he confirmed, meeting her gaze steadily.
You have no expectation of me. You didn't know who I was. That is a freedom I have not tasted in 2 decades. Their differences were stark, the billionaire in customized attire and the student in faded jeans and a backpack. The man who spoke 3 languages and commanded a global empire, and the woman struggling with basic Korean vocabulary. But their connection was immediate and profound, a shared recognition of souls seeking something authentic in a world of artifice. The next few weeks became a series of carefully planned secret outings. Ji-Hoon, using his extensive resources, orchestrated their privacy with military precision. They explored hidden temples in the mountains, ate street food late at night in Namdaemun, and spent an entire afternoon touring a museum, pretending to be strangers who kept running into each other. He was constantly checking his phone, always aware of his surroundings, always guarded. But when he looked at her, the guard dropped. One evening, they were sitting by the Han River, watching the city lights blur into a shimmering electric tapestry. Mara leaned back on the bench, pulling her jacket tighter. "It's surreal," she murmured. "I'm in Seoul, living my dream, and I'm hanging out with you." "A man who makes ugly clutter," he teased, his hand reaching out to brush a stray curl from her cheek. She caught his wrist, her touch warm and firm. "No, a man who is surprisingly kind and carries a truly enormous weight." Her eyes searched his. "But Ji-Hoon, you can't keep living like this, the secret, half-life, it's exhausting." He sighed, the sound heavy with truth. "It's necessary. If the media, if my family, if the board knew, everything would become complicated. It is not just the pressure, Mara. It is who I am dating. The Korean public, my parents, they expect a certain profile." She understood. He meant a Korean woman, from a suitable, wealthy family, someone who fit the narrative. She, a Black American student with no social standing, was the complete antithesis of the expected partner for the nation's most eligible bachelor. "So, what does this make us?" she asked, her voice quiet. "A clandestine friendship? A secret study partner?" Ji-Hoon turned, his posture straightening. The moment had arrived. The energy that pulsed through him when he was closing a deal now focused entirely on her. He took her hands in his own, pulling them close to his chest. "I think," he said, his voice low and intensely sincere, "that I have not been able to think about anything but you since I felt your head on my shoulder. You are the only person who sees Kwon Ji-Hoon, not K-Corp. You make the silence in my life bearable, and the world feel less gray." He paused, his thumb stroking her knuckles. "Mara, I am falling for the unburdened way you sleep, and the fierce, unburdened way you live." It wasn't a question, it was a declaration, a definitive, non-negotiable statement of intent from a man who never spoke lightly. Mara felt a dizzying rush of fear and elation. She had fallen for him too, for his intelligence, his hidden vulnerability, and the unexpected way he made her feel seen in this strange, new country. "I'm falling for the man who let me sleep on his shoulder," she confessed, her eyes shining, "the one who is terrified of his own life." In the quiet night, with the river flowing past, their first kiss was careful, hesitant, and then immediately, utterly certain. The accidental friendship forged in the air had landed and was now rooted firmly in the concrete and light of Seoul.
The transition from clandestine friendship to secret romance amplified the exhilaration and the strain. Every stolen moment felt like a tiny revolution against Ji-Hoon's highly structured life. They created a sanctuary in Ji-Hoon's smaller, secluded private residence, a modern apartment on the outskirts of Gangnam, far from his official family estate. Here, away from the watchful eyes of his staff and the media, they were just Ji-Hoon and Mara. He loved watching her study, the way she would chew on the end of a pen as she translated a Korean text. She loved seeing him shed the weight of his suit, relaxing into soft sweats, his focus shifting from global finance to her comfort. One cold night they were cooking tteokbokki, Mara's insistent culinary education for him, when she asked him about his future, the future beyond the next quarterly report. Do you ever think about what you want, Ji-Hoon? Not what K-Corp needs, but what you need. He stopped stirring the spicy sauce, turning to face her. I have always been defined by K-Corp. My desires were synonymous with its success. But since you... He hesitated, searching for the word. Since you fell asleep on me, I realize what I need is quiet. And a partner. A partner who fits the mold? She asked gently, knowing the answer, but needing to hear it. Ji-Hoon looked wounded. No, a partner who is you. That is the difficulty. My mother, my father, they have already chosen the mold. They expect a marriage that will create strategic alliances, not a black foreign student who likes street food and studies old temples. Mara finished for him, a small wry smile on her face. Mara, he said, taking her hand, do you think I would sacrifice this for an alliance? You are the only real thing in my life. The fear is not that I will choose them over you. The fear is that they will try to destroy us. She understood the gravity. His love was intense, but it came with the baggage of a dynastic empire. They spent hours talking about their contrasting cultures. Ji-Hoon was fascinated by her tales of community, of the rich, complex history of Black America. Mara, in turn, probed the deep Confucian roots of Korean society, the strict hierarchy and the crushing social pressures on those at the top. I worry about my ability to navigate your world, Mara admitted one night. I'm used to being judged on my academic merit, my character, not my ethnicity or my bank account or my lack of a famous grandfather. If we go public, all of that changes. I become a headline, a controversy. You are not a controversy, Ji-Hoon insisted, pulling her close. You are my peace, and I will shield you. I have enough power to build a bubble around us. A bubble only works for so long, Mara replied, resting her head on his chest. When it bursts, we have to be ready for the fallout. Despite their fears, their bond deepened. Their intimacy was built not just on passion, but on the intellectual and emotional safety they provided each other. Ji-Hoon, the meticulous CEO, started forgetting to check his email during their dates. Mara, the highly driven student, allowed herself spontaneous breaks from her rigorous schedule. They were two halves of an equation that finally balanced. The bubble, as Mara predicted, burst. It happened during a moment of professional vulnerability for Ji-Hoon. K-Corp was facing a major labor dispute involving the unionized staff at a critical smart factory facility. The public sentiment was turning against the company, painting Ji-Hoon as a ruthless, disconnected elite. In the midst of this crisis, Ji-Hoon was late for an emergency board meeting. He was rushing out of his private apartment when he was snapped by a paparazzo hiding in the shadows across the street. The picture wasn't of him. It was of Mara, wearing his oversized K-Corp hoodie, standing on the balcony, drinking coffee and looking thoughtful. It was a seemingly innocuous photo, but the location, a highly protected secondary residence, and the identity of the person in the photo were explosive. The headline the next morning was crude and vicious, splashed across every major Korean tabloid and news site. K-Corp's Kwon Ji-Hoon hiding secret foreign lover while factory workers suffer? The subsequent articles were filled with thinly veiled classism and xenophobia. They zoomed in on Mara's ethnicity, using derogatory terms, questioning her status as a mere student, and implying she was either a gold digger or a distraction to the nation's economic pillar. The backlash was immediate and brutal. K-Corp's stock dipped. Ji-Hoon's mother, the formidable matriarch of the Kwon clan, called him, her voice cold steel. "You have jeopardized the company and humiliated this family," she stated, not asked. This girl must be dealt with immediately. She is an embarrassment. She is not Korean, she is not from our class, and she is certainly not the partner K-Corp needs. Ji-Hoon stood firm. She is the woman I love, mother. And she is brilliant, kind, and loyal. I will not deal with her. I will defend her. The political fallout was just as harsh.
The media, often complicit in upholding traditional Korean social structures, ran editorials arguing that Ji-Hoon was being culturally irresponsible by choosing an American over a Korean partner, suggesting a betrayal of national identity. Mara, who had spent the morning blissfully unaware in a university library, was blindsided by the barrage of messages and calls from her university contact. She saw the headlines, translated the vile comments, and watched the video clips of her image being scrutinized by talking heads. The scrutiny was overwhelming. She had faced racism before, of course, but this was different. This was global. A targeted attack from an entire media ecosystem that suddenly had permission to pick apart her life and her character because of the man she loved. She retreated to her small student apartment, feeling physically sick. When Ji-Hoon arrived, distraught and desperate to protect her, she pulled away. "I told you the bubble would burst, but I didn't realize how suffocating the air outside the bubble would be. I am not equipped for this, Ji-Hoon. I didn't sign up to be a symbol of class war or a target for xenophobes. I came here to study, to build a career, to be myself." "You are yourself," he argued fiercely, "and I love that self. Don't let their poison change you or what we have. It's just noise, Mara. Ignorant, loud noise." "It's not just noise, Ji-Hoon. It's reality. Your reality. When I walk outside, people stare. The students whisper. My professors are suddenly concerned about my distractions. This isn't just about us. It's about what I represent in your world. I represent chaos, change, and deviation from the norm. And I don't know if I can live being the thing that brings down the most important man in Korea." Her internal conflict was real. She loved him, but she felt her identity and her self-worth being eroded by the external judgment. She felt like she was being forced into a role, the exotic mistress, the disruption that had nothing to do with her true self. She started packing a small suitcase, a silent declaration of retreat.
Just as their relationship hit this critical emotional juncture, the K-Corp labor dispute escalated into a full-scale, politically charged strike that threatened to halt production and cost billions. Ji-Hoon, required to demonstrate ruthless leadership and control, was forced to step away entirely from his personal life. He was working 72 hours straight, locked in negotiations and emergency meetings. He could only manage sporadic, exhausted text messages to Mara, which only fueled her fear of abandonment. "I am trapped. I miss you. Please don't leave. I understand, but I am an afterthought right now. You chose K-Corp first, as you always must, and I understand that too." The distance grew into a chasm. Mara saw his absence as proof that their relationship could never survive the demands of his life. He saw her pulling away as a betrayal of his love, a lack of faith in his ability to fight for them both. The conflict peaked 2 weeks later. Ji-Hoon had managed to broker a difficult, tentative agreement with the union, restoring a semblance of calm. The cost was immense, not just financially, but emotionally. He looked haggard, relying on adrenaline and sheer will. He returned to the apartment to find Mara sitting alone, the small suitcase still packed but sitting unopened. She was staring out the window, looking impossibly small. "We need to talk," he said, his voice flat with fatigue. "Yes," Mara agreed, turning to face him. Her eyes were red, but her posture was rigid with resolve. "I think I need to go home, Ji-Hoon." "No," he said, simply. "Yes, I do. This is your life. I am not built for this level of public scrutiny and family opposition. You are fighting a war with your board, a war with your mother, and a labor dispute. I am just another stressor. I can't be the reason your empire crumbles. And frankly, I cannot exist as the scandalous foreigner. It breaks my spirit." "You think I don't see that?" Ji-Hoon demanded, his control finally snapping. He ran a hand through his perpetually neat hair, making it stand on end. He walked towards her, his movements sharp and desperate. "Mara, look at me. Everything you see, the money, the power, the suits, the empire,
It is all a cage. You, the beautiful, opinionated woman who stole my peace on a transatlantic flight, you are the only key to the lock. But I don't want to be your escape, Ji-Hoon. I want to be your partner. And a partner doesn't stand by while the other person is publicly shamed. You were silent. You were protecting K-Corp's image first, before protecting me. Her voice cracked with the accusation. Ji-Hoon winced, the truth of her words cutting deep. He admitted dropping his gaze. You are right. I made a terrible mistake. I prioritized the professional crisis because I am conditioned to do so. I thought if I stabilized K-Corp, I could create a safe fortress for you. But you didn't need a fortress. You needed a champion. He lifted his head, his eyes burning with a fierce, renewed resolve. I will fix this. I cannot let you go. If I lose you, I lose myself entirely. I will show you, Mara, that you are not secondary. You are the foundation. The next day, Kwon Ji-Hoon did something unprecedented. He canceled all his professional commitments, postponing an important signing ceremony and risking the renewed wrath of his board. He scheduled an immediate, live press conference, not about K-Corp's labor dispute, but about his personal life. The press room was packed, expectant, buzzing with reporters hoping for a forced apology or a clumsy breakup statement. Ji-Hoon stepped onto the podium, looking exhausted but utterly resolute. I am here today, he began, his voice amplified across the nation, to address the malicious and unfounded articles concerning my relationship with Miss Amara Johnson. He paused, letting the silence hang heavy. Miss Johnson is not a distraction, nor is she a liability. She is the most important person in my life. She is a brilliant future architect and a student of Korean culture. She did not seek me out. I sought her out. And for those of you who have chosen to attack her character, her worth, and her ethnicity, to use words of hate and prejudice simply because she does not fit a predetermined, outdated social mold, let me be very clear. I am the CEO of K-Corp. I represent the future of this country's industry, and the future I want is one built on merit, respect, and diversity. Anyone who holds prejudice against Miss Johnson is welcome to hold prejudice against K-Corp. Because if you do not respect the woman I love, you do not respect me. If K-Corp must lose $1 billion to prove that I am a man of integrity who chooses love over convenience, so be it. I will not choose the money. He then did the unthinkable. He pulled Mara onto the stage. She was pale but stood tall and straight, radiating quiet dignity. Mara, he said, turning to her, his voice softening only for her, I want you to know that the man who sat beside you on the plane and the man who stands beside you now is fighting for you. Always. Mara looked at the sea of flashing cameras and then at the exhaustion etched on Ji-Hoon's face. In that moment, she saw the true cost of his love. He hadn't just spoken words. He had publicly risked his legacy for her. She took his hand, squeezing it firmly. She didn't have to speak. Her presence, her unwavering support in the face of the storm he had created, was her answer. The press conference didn't silence the critics. It enraged some and inspired others. The media debate was now polarized, a fierce defense of Mara by younger, globally minded Koreans versus the entrenched traditionalists. But the fight had shifted. Ji-Hoon had externalized the conflict, making it public, forcing his family and the board to either accept Mara or risk a catastrophic power struggle that would hurt the company. Mara made her own choice. She decided not to run. I'm staying, she told him later that evening, but not in a bubble and not as your protected secret. I stay as Amara Johnson, who happens to be dating Kwon Ji-Hoon. We tackled the judgment together. They established new boundaries. Mara became more visible in her academic life, giving presentations and interacting with her peers, demonstrating that she was a serious, ambitious student,
not a trophy. Ji-Hoon, still facing an uphill battle with his family, refused to compromise. He made it clear that Mara was an essential part of his life. He also started diversifying his company's media presence, using K-Corp's enormous platform to promote artists and content creators from diverse, international backgrounds, tacitly reinforcing his commitment to inclusivity. They faced daily microaggressions and challenges, awkward social events where Mara was clearly unwelcome, or board meetings where his decisions were subtly questioned as distracted. But their private life remained their strength.
They learned to lean on their cultural differences as resources, not divides. Mara taught Ji-Hoon how to articulate his feelings with more American directness. Ji-Hoon helped Mara navigate the nuances of Korean social etiquette, giving her the tools to assert herself respectfully within the hierarchy. They created a third culture, a space uniquely their own. 2 years later, the dust had settled, though the spotlight never truly dimmed. Kwon Ji-Hoon was still the CEO of K-Corp, his power solidified after successfully navigating the labor crisis and steering the company through a challenging but ultimately successful period of diversification. He was no longer the isolated man of granite. He was a leader who was still disciplined, but also visibly human, anchored by a deep connection. Mara, now Amara Johnson, M.A., had finished her cultural exchange and graduated with high honors. She had since accepted a prestigious, highly competitive role at an international architecture firm in Seoul, specializing in sustainable urban renewal, focusing on the intersection of modern design and Korean heritage. She was recognized on her own merit, though her connection to Ji-Hoon remained a constant point of fascination. They had learned that life wasn't about eliminating the challenges, but about facing them as a unified front. Their routine was a blend of his global demands and her grounded life. They traveled often, always flying together, their meet-cute a private joke they often shared over champagne in first-class cabins. One cool autumn evening, they were at their apartment, looking over the glittering cityscape, the same view from the balcony that had sparked the scandal 2 years prior. Mara was reviewing blueprints, her brow furrowed in concentration, when Ji-Hoon walked up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Still working on those ugly, cluttered buildings?" he murmured against her neck. Mara leaned back into his embrace, her pen resting on the glass table. "They're not cluttered, they're complicated and beautiful. You have to look harder to see the beauty, Ji-Hoon." "I have learned that lesson well," he said, turning her around to face him. He still looked exhausted sometimes, but his eyes held a softness that wasn't there before. "I saw the news tonight," she said, running a hand over the slight stubble on his jaw. "Your mother was quoted praising the new K-Corp diversity initiative. She said it was visionary, though certainly unconventional." Ji-Hoon chuckled, a deep, satisfied sound. "High praise coming from the matriarch. It means she is losing the war of attrition. She still doesn't like the unconventional part, but she respects the vision." He held her gaze. "She respects you, Mara. She respects the fact that you did not run and that you make me a better leader. I didn't run because you fought for me in front of the whole world. That kind of dedication is hard to ignore." He kissed her, a long, leisurely kiss that spoke of shared history and absolute certainty. "I still think about that flight," Ji-Hoon confessed, pulling back just slightly. "If you had chosen the window seat, or if I hadn't been so tired, or if I had simply pushed you away." Mara smiled, a wide, confident smile that lit up the room. She reached up and touched the curve of his shoulder, the spot where she had rested her head. "But I didn't, and you didn't. Some connections are stronger than jet lag and corporate empires, Ji-Hoon. They just need a quiet moment and a soft place to land." He took her hand, his thumb tracing the lines of her palm. "You are my soft place to land, Amara Johnson. The world can be as loud and demanding as it likes, but I will always find my peace, right here." And as the city lights shimmered below, reflecting the vastness of their two intertwined worlds, they stood together,
Two people from different continents and vastly different lives, permanently fused by a moment of accidental, shared sleep in the isolating luxury of the sky. The challenges were not over, but their love had proven itself to be the ultimate, non-negotiable asset. The integration of Amara and Ji-Hoon into the highest echelon of Korean society was not a single event, but a continuous, subtle negotiation. Mara's resilience, combined with Ji-Hoon's protective shield, became their greatest tool. Ji-Hoon's mother, Han Mi-suk, remained the central figure of opposition. A woman of immense grace and political acumen, she never resorted to overt hostility after the public press conference. Instead, she used the refined, insidious weapons of high society, exclusion, subtle criticism, and the creation of social situations designed to make Mara feel out of place. 6 months after the press conference, Ji-Hoon and Mara were required to attend the annual K-Corp Charity Gala, the social event of the year. It was a mandatory appearance for the CEO and, by extension, his partner. Mara, dressed in a stunning gown by a respected Korean designer, a tactical move suggested by Ji-Hoon's chief of staff, walked into the ballroom on Ji-Hoon's arm. Every camera, every eye, every whisper was focused on them. Han Mi-suk greeted them with a tight smile. "Ji-Hoon, you are late? And Amara, dear, you look vibrant. I hope you've been studying your table manners." This is, after all, a formal occasion, not a student mixer. Mara felt the immediate, sharp sting. She could have fired back, but she remembered the counsel Ji-Hoon had given her. "In my mother's world, power is silence and precision. Do not engage her on her terms. Change the terms." Instead of reacting to the insult, Mara smiled warmly at Mi-suk. "Thank you, Mrs. Kwon. It's an honor to attend. I just finished a research paper on the restoration of the Gyeongbokgung Palace grounds. I noticed the Preservation Society is listed as a beneficiary tonight. Will you be dedicating resources to the next phase of the Western Gardens?" Mi-suk paused, momentarily thrown off. The mention of Gyeongbokgung and the specific detail about the Western Gardens, an area only those deeply invested in cultural preservation knew about, was unexpected. It demonstrated knowledge and a genuine interest that transcended superficial social chatter. I yes, have allocated a substantial portion," Mi-suk replied, adjusting her posture. "You seem well informed." "I try to be," Mara replied easily. "If I'm going to be part of Seoul's future, I need to understand its past, and I find the balance between restoration and modernization fascinating. Maybe K-Corp could sponsor a lecture series at Yonsei on the topic." Ji-Hoon, standing beside Mara, felt a rush of pride. She hadn't just endured the challenge, she had converted a social attack into a professional, intelligent proposition. She was not only his equal, but was beginning to assert her intellectual power in his world. As their relationship moved past the initial passion and solidified into a deep domestic partnership, they began discussing their future, and the cultural differences regarding family and legacy became apparent. Ji-Hoon was under constant pressure to marry officially and produce an heir. This wasn't just a personal desire, it was a corporate and cultural mandate. The Kwon lineage had to continue, and the company needed generational stability. One evening, Mara brought it up gently. "Your mother sent another subtle hint via your sister today, a book on proper rearing of a K-Corp son. We need to talk about what marriage means to us, Ji-Hoon, because in your world, marriage is a transaction with severe terms. My terms are only one word, you," he insisted. "I know that, but look at it from the outside. If we marry, I become Mrs. Kwon. I take on the weight of the family name. In your culture, that means a complete subordination of my career to the needs of the family, especially the need for children. I want a family, yes, but I will not sacrifice my identity for an heir."
Ji-Hoon sat across from her, his expression serious. "My family expects me to marry a woman who will be a dedicated, non-working wife and mother. I expect to marry a woman who builds cities. The only way to overcome this is to redefine what a Kwon marriage looks like. He came up with a revolutionary solution. Revolutionary for the conservative Kwon family, at least. He proposed a prenuptial agreement that not only protected Mara's assets, but guaranteed her ability to pursue her career independently. More radically, he proposed a public statement upon their engagement that would announce Mara's intention to continue her professional life and her commitment to balancing family with her architectural career. "I am setting a precedent," he told her. "I am telling them that the modern K-Corp marriage does not require the woman to become invisible. It will cause scandal, but it will be our scandal, setting our rules." Mara was moved to tears. "You always find the power play that protects the quiet life," she whispered. "You're turning a patriarchal expectation into a feminist statement just to keep me at your side." "I am turning an impossible situation into our reality," he corrected, "because my reality only works with you in it." The final major challenge came when Mara's firm won a massive bid to design a cultural center in a major North American city. Mara was required to lead the project for a full 6 months, necessitating a long-distance separation, a separation that tested the hard-won trust between them. Ji-Hoon's life in Seoul was a whirlwind of power and proximity. Mara's life in the U.S. was a busy, independent existence, surrounded by new colleagues, including a charming, talented co-lead on the project. The distance was brutal. Ji-Hoon, accustomed to seeing Mara every night, reverted to his stressed, isolated state. The media, scenting blood, began running speculative pieces. CEO Kwon's foreign fling fades? Is the architect trading Seoul for success back home? Ji-Hoon found himself grappling with the demons of his past, the fear of abandonment, the fear that this beautiful, independent woman would eventually choose the easy, unburdened path that didn't involve the weight of his name. One night, exhausted and alone in Seoul, he saw a paparazzi photo of Mara laughing with her co-lead after a late work dinner. It was innocent, but the insecurity, fueled by the manipulative media, gripped him. He called her, and the conversation was tense, their first real argument over the distance. "You look comfortable," he said, his voice flat and accusing. "We closed a major structural negotiation, Ji-Hoon. I'm celebrating. What's wrong?" Mara asked, sensing the icy undertone. "Is everything well between you and your colleague? He seems quite close," he pressed. Mara took a deep breath. "Ji-Hoon, this is not fair. I am working a 20-hour day, building the biggest project of my career, and you are acting like a suspicious CEO. I left Seoul, not our commitment. You have to trust me, or this is impossible." "I have given up everything, risked everything for you, Mara. Don't you understand the pressure I'm under? The moment you leave, everyone, including my mother, starts telling me you're not coming back. And I am tired of fighting that fight alone," he confessed, his voice breaking with rare vulnerability. Mara was silent for a moment, processing his confession not as an attack, but as a plea for reassurance. "I understand the fight is tiring, my love," she said, her voice soft but firm. "But you are not fighting alone. And I am not a runner. Look at the history we have. I fell asleep on a perfect stranger, and then I stood on a global stage for him. That's not the action of someone who runs when things get hard. My commitment to you is not tied to my zip code. It is tied to your honesty and your heart. And if you trust the person I am, you will trust the decisions I make, including working late with a colleague. I need you to lead K-Corp. I need you to trust me to lead my own firm. We are a partnership of equals, Ji-Hoon, not a warden and a prisoner." Her words hit him like cold water.
he had momentarily allowed the old, controlling, privileged Ji-Hoon to emerge, fueled by insecurity. He had reverted to type, seeking to control the one thing he feared losing. "You are right," he conceded, the tension leaving his body in a sudden rush. "I apologize. I let the pressure and the media get into my head. I trust you completely, Mara. I am just afraid of the quiet in this house without you. But I will fight the fear, not you." From that day forward, the nature of their long-distance communication changed. It became less about checking in and more about sharing their professional triumphs, asking for advice, and sustaining their intellectual and emotional intimacy. They used technology to bridge the physical gap, proving that their bond was strong enough to exist without proximity. 6 months later, Mara returned, successful, triumphant, and utterly devoted. The separation had solidified their commitment, proving that their relationship was robust enough to withstand both external fire and internal strain. Ji-Hoon didn't propose with an extravagant public display or a diamond the size of a pigeon egg, though he certainly could have. He proposed on a quiet Sunday afternoon, in their private Gangnam apartment, sitting on the floor surrounded by architectural blueprints and K-Corp financial reports. He presented her with a simple, elegant ring, custom designed to incorporate a sleek, minimalist structure reminiscent of a modern Korean roofline, and a diamond that was brilliant but not ostentatious. "This ring represents our future, Amara Johnson," he said, his eyes filled with emotion. "It's a design that is rooted in Korean tradition, but built with modern, international strength. It is beautiful, it is complicated, and it is entirely ours." "I choose this chaos, Ji-Hoon," Mara replied, tears streaming down her face as he slid the ring onto her finger. "I choose your world, and I choose my world, and I choose the beautiful, unconventional one we are building together." Their eventual wedding was a meticulously negotiated event. It was traditional enough to satisfy the Kwon elders, a full Korean ceremony with hanboks and formal bows, but international enough to honor Mara's heritage, a smaller, joyful reception with Black American jazz, family, and food. Han Mi-suk attended, stiffly correct but with a new, grudging respect for the woman who had not only won her son's heart, but had also changed the course of the Kwon dynasty without compromising herself. Mara and Ji-Hoon continued to live a life that was constantly scrutinized, constantly challenged, but profoundly rewarding. He was the most powerful man in Korea. She was a rising global star in architecture. They were an odd, beautiful anomaly, the billionaire CEO and the black architect, bound together by an accidental nap and the courage to choose love over convenience. They often flew together, always in the same seats, always with a shared smile that remembered the moment it all began. And sometimes, hours into the long flight back to Seoul, when Ji-Hoon was finally too exhausted to fight the weight of his empire, he would lean his head against Mara's shoulder, seeking the unburdened peace he had first experienced and found again with her. The silence in the cabin was still a sanctuary, but now it was a sanctuary they shared. Thank you so much for following Kwon Ji-Hoon and Amara Johnson on their beautiful, complicated journey. If you enjoyed this epic story of love, culture, and high-stakes drama, please consider subscribing to Afro-Korean Stories by Andrella for more original narratives. Your support means the world and helps us bring more stories like this to life. Don't forget to like and share.